I promised I would put the birthday slide back up because we have so many May birthdays and it's timely. Once again, belated happy birthdays to Richard and Carol. Eleanor Meyer's birthday was yesterday, and tomorrow Lynn Rogo, Marcia Hunt, and Sally Brandt all share a birthday, and Diane will close out the month for us. So happy birthday to everyone on the who's born in May, that is. And this coming weekend, the American Cancer Society on campus at UCLA is holding the Relay for Life, and we had a presentation about that a few weeks ago. The UCLA Rotaract Club has a team which we are supporting, and the event, like everything else, is being held virtually. So it occurs on Saturday afternoon starting at 2, runs till about 3. This is the schedule. If anybody is interested and able to participate, and the website where it will be streamed down below, relay@ucla.org. And one thing I want to point out, for the benefit of anyone who's lost a loved one or has a loved one struggling with cancer, the survivorship ceremony is especially moving. So it's worth attending even just some of these events, even if you can't make it for the entire event. And also this year, once again, our club will continue our annual tradition of presenting sabers of excellence to the top ranking graduating ROTC Air Force and Army cadets. On May 28th, the Air Force ROTC will be holding its graduation ceremonies, and Cadet Robbie Newberry will receive the Saber of Excellence. We don't yet have someone who's available to represent us. So if any of you are interested, again, it's virtual, it's in the afternoon. I'll double check. Diana mentioned the time and now it escapes me, but I will mention that again beforehand. And then the Army ROTC ceremony is being held on June 13th. And
Nancy, I'll do the Army ROTC.
Yes, I was just going to announce that you were representing us. And that's, thank you, Phil. And that's special because Phil's daughter, Samantha, just graduated from Penn State in Army ROTC and has now been commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army. Is that correct, Phil?
That's correct. She's right here. Say hi to her.
Hi.
Oh, hi, welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Oh, it's wonderful to see you.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Had I known, I would have introduced you as a guest. So another very welcome guest. And it's great. It's great to see you. And to see you back on this coast for a while, anyway.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yes, we'll want to hear more about that. And as I mentioned, the district conference is being held this weekend. Starts Friday evening, runs until mid-afternoon on Sunday, and hopefully you can join at least some of it. It will be celebrating the closing out of a very strange year, which, in spite of all of the challenges, I think has had very many positive aspects to it. And I think our club has come through very well, as has the district and a number of other clubs. And there will be the district changing of the guard. So we will thank Bet Hall for her stellar service as district governor this year, and welcome Giddy Javid, who takes over as district governor on July 1st. So very worth attending, and hope I will see some of you there. And although it depends on whether they do it as a webinar. Some parts, if it's done as a webinar, we can't see each other, but we'll be there spirit anyway. The district is organizing support for the pandemic, both in locally in the underserved communities of South LA and in India. They're asking for donations and volunteers to help provide mobile vaccination clinics in South LA, as well as relief in India for the devastating effects of a very severe second wave of the COVID-19 virus. And it truly is dire. They don't have enough facilities. They don't even have enough oxygen. It's a really a tragic situation. And for anyone who is interested in making a donation or donations, there is a mechanism on the District 5280 Charitable Foundation website to make this possible. So we'll keep an eye on how this is progressing. And the upcoming Memorandum of Understanding training is being held on May 22nd. All clubs who want grant assistance, either from the district or from the Rotary Foundation or both, have a minimum of 2 club members who are MOU certified by June 15th. And district grants for the coming year will be $2,000 each. The Rotary Foundation grants are $30,000. The first certification session is being held on, as I said, on May 22nd. They're going to be holding another one in early June. I don't know the date yet. Yes, Phil?
Do you already have 2 Rotarians from our club who are doing this?
I don't know the answer to that yet. Are you willing to be one?
Maybe. If anybody has a burning desire to do it. I mean, if a club doesn't need to have one, then
yes, right. We'll follow up with you about that. The training doesn't take very long. I did training a couple of years ago, and it has to be renewed every year. Yeah, I did it a couple of years ago.
Yeah, because both Lisa and I could both do it.
I'm planning to attend, Nancy, as well.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, I will confirm with you. And also, in case the May 22nd date doesn't work for you, I will let you know when the second date is. As I said, it's sometime in early June. We haven't been told yet, but wonderful. I'm really relieved.
Okay, yeah, I'll do it with Mark. We can be he can be my buddy.
Oh, we'll be a tag team.
Fantastic. Okay. And speaking of Mark, Mark is serving as our scribe for today, and I understand next week too. Bless you, Mark. And thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And now I would like to bring on Tom Barron, who will introduce today's guest speaker, Isabel Wang. Tom?
Thank you, Nancy. It's my pleasure to introduce Isabel Wang. Isabel is the co-founder and executive director of the Bridging Tech Charitable Fund, also known as Bridging Tech. She is a senior at Stanford University studying symbolic systems. You may ask, what is symbolic systems major? Well, she describes it as an interdisciplinary major focusing on the interactions between computer science, neuroscience, psychology, linguistics, and philosophy. That certainly clears it up. Isabel grew up as an activist leading community initiatives, improving race relations and public health with a focus on educational equity. At Stanford, she continued her passion for social justice by helping research video interventions for equitable children's education at the Stanford Graduate School of Education, thereby improving technology that provides educational empowerment to youth, parents, educators, and healthcare workers in the low and middle income countries. This led to her founding Bridging Tech Trust Fund, a nonprofit formed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic by Stanford students passionate about educational equity. Bridging Tech is active in 15 cities around the US, and its mission is to bridge the digital divide for underserved children by providing laptops for at-home learning, along with long-term enriching educational opportunities. They strive to impact the lives of children through continuing ongoing tutoring and mentorship programs. Now that sounds very admirable, so I will let her now tell you all about Bridging Tech. You're up, Isabel.
Welcome, Isabel.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to join all of you today. And I feel like I've stepped into a close family. So thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you, Tom, for working with me to make sure that, this could happen. And also thank you, Diane. And I don't know if Lori's here, but they really made sure that we could share our mission with all of you and start a discussion about educational equity. We actually work with them to help make sure that their students can also receive laptops. So I'm just so grateful for all of you. I'm going to share my presentation now. And let me just do this. Basically, I just want to tell you a bit about what I've learned over the course of creating Bridging Tech, and I would love to start a discussion with all of you. So if anything comes to mind, please feel free to, unmute and stop me and ask a question or bring up a discussion. I am completely willing and open to having that kind of conversation. And that's the entire point of this. So any way we can improve educational equity would be wonderful. And I think that it comes from working together and putting our brains together. So just feel free to interrupt me. So basically, let me try to move forward. This is me. This is my slide. I am from Shaker Heights, Ohio. And I know that every now and then when I say Shaker Heights, somebody knows about it, but very often people know about Shaker Heights because we have been working on race relations for 30 plus years and focusing on it as a community altogether. I remember in high school, I used to lead community forums at our local library or work on the academic gap with our superintendent advisory council. And that's really because when you come to Shaker, it is diverse, but it isn't very integrated. And so what would happen is me as an Asian student and one of only a handful of Asian students within my entire town, I would go into the cafeteria every day. And what I would see was all of the white students sitting together and all of the Black students sitting together. And then me as an Asian student, not quite knowing where I fit in. So for me, I wanted to work on race relations because I wanted to make sure everybody felt included and we can make some progress in society. So that has always been really important to me. I faced discrimination early on, and I realized that, we need to come together as people, as a community to try to make these differences. So race relations and social justice has always been a huge passion of mine. And then when I went to college, what I started doing is putting my passions together. And one thing I really love doing is try to help students. And what I did is I ended up working at a research lab, as Tom introduced. And at the research lab, I realized that you can use technology to help heal these societal issues. And the way I noticed that was because our research focused around video interventions for educational equity. So you'd be able to show a student a video intervention about deep breathing, for example, and that would greatly improve their executive functions, which includes, how well they're thinking or switching tasks or planning ahead. And so that was really eye-opening for me. So with all of this and with all of my passions, I quickly realized that what I do want to help with is educational equity, because I grew up knowing from my parents that education is one of the greatest ways to promote social justice and equity. So educational equity has always been really important to me. And I combined educational equity, social justice, and technology. And I thought that making sure that technology access was out there for educational equity was incredibly important. Let me go to the next slide. So you can know a little bit about my co-founder, Margot. Margot is an incredible woman. I met her at Outdoor House, which you'll see on the next slide. But basically, Margot is really passionate about bridging tech too, because she's from the Bay Area and she's noticed these kinds of disparities her entire life. She has volunteered at women's shelters for many years, and she noticed firsthand the difficulties that people have when they don't have access to technology. So she heard directly from the people she worked with and learned that technology is incredibly important to access resources. And so she also realized that the digital divide affects people of all ages, but also that people affected by homelessness have so many obstacles to get through. So what we wanted to do was come together, create bridging tech, try to help those who are most under-resourced. And for us, when we were creating this, that was helping students affected by homelessness. So you can see in this slide, we met at Outdoor House, which is a dorm, and we both agreed that we were really passionate about social justice and that technology was crucial to opportunity. What happened was we started this last year as the COVID pandemic was somewhat starting. It was a little bit underway. And I don't know if you noticed this, but we always noticed the news articles that would come out. And the news articles would say, oh, check out this student that was sitting outside of a Starbucks to try to get internet access. Or, you know, this student wasn't able to attend school whatsoever. So what we started doing is we actually tried calling different shelters across the country, and we tried to figure out what the actual issue was with making sure that students have technology access. What we found was a little bit startling. So first, we found that 11 million students across the country do not have access to their own device at home for learning. And while that may not seem that stunning, if you think about the way that technology is becoming even more integrated with education, it is pretty crucial to realize that we need devices for learning nowadays. People who have devices, students who have these devices because of, you know, privileged backgrounds, they will be able to complete homework much easier, or they will be able to access course materials so much easier. A lot of the students we serve, we learned, had been going to public libraries or staying after school only whenever they could. So the couple hours that the school let them to go to the computer lab to finish their assignments. So you can see even with these very simple examples, how crucial technology is. We also found out that there are about 3.7 million people who do not have access to the internet. And so that was also pretty crucial for us, because when you have a laptop for learning, you may not have internet access. Beyond that, what I think might be interesting to all of you is something that we do is we try to figure out where the highest rates of homelessness are across the country. And that's because we want to make sure we can help as many students affected by homelessness as possible. And Los Angeles was actually the second highest area of homelessness. So New York City beats LA by about 79, or it is 79,000 students affected by homelessness, but Los Angeles has 56,000 students affected by homelessness, so not too far behind, which means that there's a lot of work we can do to try to make sure that we create better lives for the people we serve. So let me move on. Our shared purpose is basically to bridge the digital divide and improve educational equity. There are so many things that we do to try to help students holistically, which also includes mentorship and tutoring services. Also just trying to make sure that they get the academic resources that they could possibly have. And that's because also in our research, we found out that throughout this year of COVID, so since last April to this April, and now it's May, based on the research that was out there, we learned that the academic gap could be exacerbated by up to 20% because of the lack of technology resources. So on top of the previous inequities that were already existing with COVID and not having devices, that would be exacerbated. So we were trying our best to raise money for laptops for learning, and then we grew our projects from there. We received an incredible response. I mean, everybody, generally when they hear that students without laptops for learning were simply not going to school, and those without the means to purchase laptops were those that were going to be left behind, they wanted to help in any way possible. So we were able to fundraise over $220,000 and get as many laptops out there as possible. And we've grown our team as well. We have many volunteers from across the country who are willing to drive if necessary to pick up devices or help ship things out, host technology drives, or mentor our students. And continued growth, I mean, this is sort of exciting. We're working on different things such as an online educational platform that I will tell you about a little bit later, but we are continuing to grow because there are many other things that we have to consider with educational equity, including the compounding issues that students affected by homelessness face. So it's not just that they don't have a laptop, but maybe they don't have a steady supply of food. Or, I mean, if you think about the shelter system, in many cases, students enter one shelter and are only there for a few months before having to leave and move to another shelter. So very often what you see is these students also don't have access to consistent mentors. All of these things compound on one another so that students affected by homelessness and under-resourced students in general just keep on getting left behind. Another thing that you may want to think about, especially with rising talks about new strains of COVID, is that we've learned that COVID affects older adults a bit more than COVID affects younger adults. And what we've also learned from research is that those affected by homelessness actually age faster than others because of the different physical limitations or physical barriers and obstacles that they have to get through. So that there are also a lot of inequities that we have to think about that all sort of join together. And what has been so incredible is realizing how we can come together and really make a difference as long as we all work together. And no matter how young or how old you are, as long as you're passionate, you can make a difference. Something that we're continuing to do is figure out what the laptop gap is or the device need is for the cities we serve. And this fall, we learned that many of the shelters that, or not many of the shelters, many of the school districts that had promised laptops previously. Well, first you should know that we learned that many of the shelters we serve didn't receive those laptops last year, even though they were promised. But many of the school districts that promised them last year are no longer promising them for the upcoming year. So even though in my mind, COVID sort of enlightened us by showing us what we really need to work on, it's frustrating to me that in some cases we are moving back to what we were doing beforehand. But yeah, I mean, we can all work together and share these stories. I think the most important thing is to share these issues because then people will be able to share it further and work together to create an impact. And you know what? I actually just want to move on to the future. Okay, so you've already heard about everything we've been working on. We also partnered with Computers to Kids, which is in Southern California, actually in the San Diego region. And we also partnered with Give Back Box so that our device donations are much smoother. And those partnerships have been incredible. I think what I've learned also from all of this is you can't do it all alone. And so if you can partner with other groups that are experts at what they do, you can get a lot more accomplished that way. So as a really cool example, Coalition for the Homeless in New York City is a huge advocate for those affected by homelessness. And because we care about bridging the digital divide, which includes hardware, but also includes internet access and digital literacy, Coalition for the Homeless was able to actually win a case recently so that now New York City as a city has to ensure that all of their shelters, I think it was over 200 shelters in the city, have internet access, which they didn't before. So that was incredible. And we love working with groups such as that. And then beyond that, our biggest goal is just to become a more self-sustaining nonprofit. Right now, what's interesting is we are actually all volunteers, but we would love to make sure that we are actually able to pay employees in the future so that we can continue bridging the digital divide. So something interesting here for future considerations is when we think about educational equity and social justice, we also have to think about the cycles that continue on. And it's very easy for those cycles to form. For example, coming from an under-resourced background and also having kids that are also under-resourced. That is a very easy cycle to be formed. But what we want to do is somehow break that cycle. And for us, and as I mentioned before, for me, I think that the best way we can do that is through education. So if we can give the educational tools to uplift our students, we can break those cycles. Something to think about too, maybe this can start up the discussion because I'd love it if you all joined in, but we can also think about helping the parents. That's something that I've learned about when talking to our shelter contacts or different directors at shelters. It's that sometimes one of the most helpful things could be to help the parents. So help them receive a high-paying job, serve as a role model for their kids, and also make sure that there's enough food on the table for their kids and shelter. Another thing to think about is, I believe Biden is working on universal pre-K, and so we could have a discussion on that too. But there are different considerations that are there about educational equity, making sure that kids receive the appropriate bright future ahead of them. And then another thing that was interesting is for education, if we want to make sure that all kids receive excellent educations, we also need to think about how we are paying teachers. So for example, if we were to give higher wages to teachers, potentially we'd create a more competitive career and potentially make sure that those who are teaching are the best that we could possibly have for all of our students. And as long as we're also paying attention to diversity, I believe that in a way that could really, really help our education system. But that also depends on all of the zoning laws with taxes, and there's a lot we could get into there. But another thing we can think about is ed tech. And I think that this is really exciting for me because, like I said earlier, it combines education and technology and what I'm passionate about. But there are so many solutions out there right now that we can start looking into. And what I mentioned earlier was we are coming out with an online platform soon through Bridging Tech. Though it's not launched yet, the entire point is to make sure that under-resourced students can actually access all of these educational opportunities for that you know, in many cases, many privileged students would be able to access, such as tutoring or finding great mentors. And we want to make sure all of that is free. So we're doing that. We're putting our academic partners on our platform and just trying to make sure that it's really easy to find these role models to look up to. Another thing to think about is, what if we start from how students learn? So for example, what if we transform note-taking and we make it so that anybody who uses a specific technology very easily learns whatever they write down? And we can do that through spaced repetition flashcards or different reminders, but there are so many things out there within the world of ed tech right now that we can think of to improve educational equity. And potentially all that means is coming up with a great idea, trying to figure out what would actually help students, and especially those who need the most help to get through school. And then a few other things to consider would be, you know, we do need to work on internet access. I know that we're also working on that, and there are talks about that in general with different legislators, but that is something that we need to focus on. And what is really helpful is actually being able to talk to different legislators in the local cities we serve and tell them, you know, we think that our kids need more technology access. So if we can make sure that enough funding goes into these laptops or internet access, that would be incredibly helpful. So being able to reach out to those legislators would help us make an impact. And then finally, I think that through all of this, we've also realized that nonprofits are there to sort of fill in the gaps that our government may not cover. And so what would really help the most is having nonprofits and the government work together to try to fill these gaps. So those are a few of the things that I've been thinking about, but I would love to just start a discussion with all of you and talk more about educational equity. I'm curious about what you are most passionate about. If you have any questions for me or anything else that you can think of. Thank you.
Isabel, that was a wonderful presentation. I'm so impressed.
Thank you.
By what the two of you have put together in just over a year as students. So before we take questions, I want to ask Diane Good to share her experience with your organization.
Thank you, Nancy. Hi, Isabella. How are you? I know. Hi.
Hi, it's so great to see you again. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share.
Well, you're very welcome. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing it with us. I actually think you should become a Rotarian, Isabel. Anyway, Isabel's organization provided 40 laptops for the kids here at Westwood Transitional Village, the students. And yes, thank you so much for those laptops. The kids loved them. They're using them. We have 3 that are graduating this year, going on to either community college or to college, and they're so excited that they have a laptop to take with them. So I can't thank you enough. We were so surprised when they arrived and happy, and it was right, I think, before Christmas, so the kids really felt that it was a special gift. So thank you so much.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Diane. And Isabel, again, I really congratulate you. John, you had, and I think Phil, you had your hand up. So Phil and then John.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, have you thought about putting these computers like in libraries and Boys and Girl Clubs and YMCAs? So rather than giving out 50 computers to 50 different people, that 50 computers might be able to help 500 people. Because you figure someone might be on the computer a couple hours a day. They don't necessarily need the laptop the rest of the day. But so if you put them in libraries and Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs, you might be able to even get more involvement from the community in terms of being able to use them. Is that something that they're thinking about? And now that COVID's kind of on the other side of COVID, is that something you're thinking about?
I actually do love that you brought this up. Yeah, a lot of our considerations early on were because of COVID, because libraries were closed, computer labs were closed, kids without laptops wouldn't be able to attend school. So we needed to make sure every kid had their own laptop, because you also can't have 2 kids using the same laptop for 2 different classes. But something that we have been doing more recently is working with groups that will create these computer labs or create, I guess, more community spaces, especially within shelters, to actually host the computers. And I love that suggestion. I'm writing it down to maybe think about focusing on that more, because you're right. We would be able, if we gave devices to more, I guess, communal spaces, more people would be able to use them. At the same time, though, having a permanent laptop of your own allows you to be able to work on your educational homework or any other work whenever you want. So it gives you a bit of freedom. And so I think that we need to strike a balance between the two to also make sure that kids feel like they have their own permanent device, which is
I mean, I definitely think that maybe the high school kids should have their own, but like middle school and elementary school, they don't really need to have a full-time device, especially a computer. So I just thought it might be another way to expand the outreach, and then parents could also go to the library to work on resumes, or if they have to take a seminar class online, they can go to the local library or YMCA to take that class online. It's just something to think about.
Phil, you'd be surprised, but elementary school kids are very technically required to have iPads and computers. So, and they can program all 6 of your remotes into one. So I would not count out elementary school kids.
What a blessing. John, you had your hand up.
Yes. Very good talk, Isabel. Thank you. Are you, or maybe you said this, are you a 501c3 nonprofit?
Yes, we are. We received that actually, I think only 2 months after we filed for it, which was a pretty quick turnaround for 501c3.
That's very quick. Yeah. And how did you go about raising? You said you raised about 220,000.
Yeah.
How did you go about doing it? Where'd you get it from? Individuals or foundations or what?
You know what's so incredible? The majority of that, if not the great majority of that, was from individuals. And usually individuals, if you look at most of the donations, most of the individuals that donated would only donate enough for about 1 laptop. So we received incredible donations. There were also other incredibly generous donors that would give, you know, $20,000 grants, and they were really passionate about their own city. What we actually do, that's actually a really good question. We are able to, and this is what we did for the large donors, but if they wanted a specific city for all of their funds to go toward or their contributions to move toward, we were able to actually specifically work with even more shelters in their city with their generous funds. And then beyond that, we've also been looking more into foundations, and we've received a few incredible grants also from foundations. But I think that what has been so fantastic to see was just the grassroots support. So just generally, we would use a GoFundMe campaign and just get the word out there by sending emails to people, which is incredible because we raise so much money through emails. But then also what was really helpful was we received a few news features. So then people who read the news or watched the show would know that they could give to our cause. And we received many donations through that.
Did you ever use GoFundMe?
Yeah. We use GoFundMe for every single campaign we've done so far.
Very good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
You must be masters of so many things. And you're full-time students still, right? And you have a major that sounds fairly complex. So along with that, you are doing phenomenal fundraising, building an organization, expanding your organization. I'm in awe. This is really so inspiring.
White has his hand up.
Yeah, Isabel, I've got a couple of questions for you. Years ago, I think 4 or 5 years ago, we heard from a entrepreneur who wanted to provide laptops to Africa, and he had the price down to like $100 a piece. What does your organization? How much does $1,000? How many laptops or whatever they use? I guess laptops can that buy? And secondly, do you know anything about the success of using laptops in LAUSD?
Oh, interesting. First, I want to say that the price is actually the same that we found with our incredible refurbishing partner. Basically, we have a deal where when people donate laptops to us so that they can be refurbished and reused, we are able to create a partnership so that if we were to just simply buy laptops and not have any donated laptops, we actually receive them, or we were able to buy them and then send them out for about $75 a piece, but then you have to factor in shipping. So it is about $100. But also what's incredible is with this fantastic partnership, again, I'm just really excited about our partnership that we've been working on for the past, I believe we've had this for about 6 months. They also add in free headphones for our students, because very often students affected by homelessness are in environments that are really loud or different things are going on. So it's hard to focus too. So the headphones are really helpful. And then for LAUSD, you know, I actually don't know too much about the specific device donations within the school district. I actually find that it's a bit hard to get in contact with the right people at school districts. And it's a lot easier for us to work with shelter partners to ask, you know, how many of your students need devices so we can give directly to them. Because like I said earlier, in some cases, and we found a few in LA in which this happened, but in some cases, the district promises to give out laptops. And I believe all of California was supposed to do that this past year, but the shelters that we work with still didn't receive them. So none of our students in a specific shelter would have access to their classes. So that's why we like going straight to the shelters and straight to other community organizations that work with students affected by homelessness.
Now, I understand there's a special problem in the shelters. I'm just wondering, you know, there was a big brouhaha about LAUSD buying several 100,000 laptops for students and passing them out. And iPads, I guess, or whatever, equally powerful. And then at first we got some bad feedback about the results, and then we've heard nothing for a year or two. So I'm really wondering about these students who are actually using these things at home. Are they usable at home? Is the Wi-Fi too much of a problem? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. Those are all the questions that we are actually trying to find out too. That's why now we're also trying to work on the policy side to figure out exactly what's going on, what's the budget like for technology access. But the thing is, we have found, okay, many of our shelter partners in LA, they do receive those laptops for their kids. So their kids have those laptops. But like I said, many of our other ones don't. And the question is, where did the laptops go? Because they were supposed to go to the students. In terms of Wi-Fi for our shelters, we like to make sure that the shelters we work with have internet access. And if they don't, we like to help them find that access. So for example, I can give you an example of our partner in the Bay Area. We work with Shelter Tech, which gives internet access for free to shelters and just make sure that they have strong internet connectivity. And so what we would do in the Bay Area is we would work with our shelter partners and say, hey, if you don't have strong internet or if you don't have internet, please work with this group and they'll get it done for you. But other than that, the shelters that we work with have internet connectivity for their families, or they are in the middle of making sure that that can happen.
Mm-hmm. And do you have your hand up?
I do, Nancy. Dwight, in answer to your question, one of the issues we had, of course, we have large families and they can't share one computer, and USD was only giving one computer per family. And so that created part of the problem for us. We provided internet to all of the families. Now we track our kids and we track that they attend school and that their grades are passing, that they're doing well. And if not, we hook them up with a tutor right away in the areas that they're having difficulty in. And we have found that not only are they attending, and they kind of have fun on Zoom, actually, not only are they attending, but they're actually thriving. They're doing quite well. We were impressed by it. But in the beginning, you're right, they were not. They weren't having trouble connecting. The teachers weren't as well prepared for Zoom as they are now. So there were a lot of different things that impacted that. But now the kids are in a routine that they seem to really enjoy and they seem to be thriving in.
Okay, thanks, Diane.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That was helpful.
So, Tom, you had your hand up.
I did. Isabel, your presentation was laced with the word educational equity. And there's a huge difference between equity and equality. And I want to make sure that, in my mind anyway, that equality means, everybody has the same chance, the same opportunity to enjoy the internet or to use it. Equity means you're trying to basically bring up the individuals to an income level to where they can access the internet. I think that's the bit. What about you said there's 3.7 million people who do not have access to the internet. Well, that's not many out of a population of 350 million or whatever the country is. Are you sure now you're not giving laptops, et cetera, to those who have it already or have a need, or is it going to the people who really don't have the access and can't afford it?
That's a really good question. And I'm actually checking right now because I think it's students. Yeah, so it's 3.7 million students, or 3.7 million households with students within the country don't have internet access. Just so that's clear. But yeah, I mean, equity versus equality, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's a huge thing that we focus on. And that's why I keep on saying educational equity instead of educational equality. It's because we want to work with those who need the most help to be able to get to the same almost standards of living or standards of opportunities as others. So for us, the way we do that is by working with students affected by homelessness, because as I mentioned before, there are so many compounding factors to the experience of homelessness. And so for us, being able to give technology access to those who, in our minds, need it most is our way of contributing to educational equity. I'm not sure if I answered your question though. Is that what you were searching for?
Well, yes, I wanted there's a difference between people who can't afford it.
Yes, yeah.
And need it. But if they're homeless, obviously they don't have one or something like that. I didn't realize that many students were homeless.
Yeah, there are so many students affected by homelessness across the country. And what's actually really difficult for us to try to do is, for us, we actually find that many of the people who work with us and want to contribute to the cause want to give specifically to their area. And so it's hard for us to be able to help those who need it most in rural areas, as an example, or in smaller cities, because there are less people who want to support those students. Actually, this summer, we're having a fundraiser and we're specifically working directly with a tribal government. And right now we're thinking it's going to be the Rosebud Sioux tribe in South Dakota. But that's because if you read about tribal nations and students there, you realize that students affected by homelessness and students within tribal nations are all severely impacted by the digital divide. And very often, not many people choose to focus on, you know, either population, and especially those in tribal nations. So for us, what's actually important is trying to find those who need our help the most, and then finding the way in which we can help them. And for us, that would be this summer, like working on a fundraiser where we can support those students.
That's great. Any more questions? Gordon, did I see your hand? Oh, Gordon has a question.
Just put my hand up. I'm just curious. I think I heard Tom say that both you and, is it Melody, your partner?
Oh, Margot.
Margot, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Tom. We're our seniors. So what happens when you guys graduate?
So actually, this is really interesting. This is why we want to try to make sure that Bridging Tech becomes a self-sustaining organization. So most nonprofits, they'll dedicate like 10% to 20% to overhead costs. Right now, because we're all volunteers, almost all of our funds are going directly to laptops or the other ways that we support our students. But in the future, we do want to make sure that there is that 10% so that we can actually have people work full-time as an employee and support themselves and survive, which right now we can volunteer full-time because we are students, but in the future we would need salaries to survive. So I think that that's a really good question. Also, just so you know, I didn't quite mention this earlier, but I actually took a leave of absence to work on this. So I'm still going to be a senior next year. I'm a rising senior right now, and I have been for the past year. So I'm still going to be around for a few years at least, and then hopefully be able to work on it continued after.
That's great. We have more questions for Isabel. Isabel, thank you so much for being with us today. Your talk and your work are fascinating and inspiring. And as a small token of appreciation for your time with us, we will be making a donation in your name to the Westwood branch of the Los Angeles Public Library, which is which is a cause that's near and dear to our hearts. We are supporters of all kinds of education. So I personally will look forward to hearing more about your organization as it grows and develops, and I'm sure that the rest of our members will as well. And before we close, I want to ask the board members if you could possibly stay on for 5 minutes after this meeting. We'd like to take a quick vote on, I want to say, an education-related matter. So again, thank you so much for being with us, and please do feel free to stay in touch with us, and I'm sure you'll be in touch with Diane over time as well.
Thank you so much. I want to say again, thank you all so much for inviting me and for having me. It truly is such an honor to be able to talk to all of you and have this discussion. I really appreciate your time. So thank you so much. I loved all of your questions and suggestions. I'm going to think about this. This is really close to my heart. So I really appreciate all of you spending time with me today.
We certainly wish you well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, Ron.